Hi everyone. Good morning. Welcome to sadly the last day of ZuriHack, and we also have gonna have the final keynote now. But don't worry, we have some more stuff in the afternoon, like the AGDA track and also the project presentations, which is of course some people's favorite part of ZuriHack. Yeah, so a pleasure to introduce Domen, who is very well known in the Nix community and also well known in the Hascal community. Probably we all know there's a bit of an intersection between the groups. Yeah, he's the founder of Cachix and devenv.sh, and yeah, NixOS Weekly writer and general awesome guy. So yeah, please take it away.
Thank you. Hey everyone. Do you all have coffee? Did you all have coffee? Good. All right. Some happy faces. That's good. All right. Today I want to talk about developer experience. I think it's a bit of a different talk than what we would usually be having at ZuriHack. It's kind of split into two parts. One is like the work that we've been doing. And then at the end, it's a bit of like what I would like Hascal to be, but we cannot spend time on that. So hopefully others can work with us or fix the things that we would like to see fixed in Hascal. So I'm sure you all know about the developer hierarchy of needs. It's a bit, I like this graph a lot. I like this diagram a lot because it's like a double meaning of functional. So it's like the idea is that we all want functional software, right? That's at the very bottom of our needs. But then at the very top is this idea that software is also pleasurable. Who's frustrated using software? Okay, pretty much everyone. Good. So there's some room for improvements, right? And I think that top little triangle there is usually more like a breadcrumb than a triangle, and in terms of how much effort and time we put into that. So I think that's something that we've been looking at, mostly because Nix is famous for being hard to use or unpleasant to use. But I think that Hascal has also a bit of fame in that area, and I think that is something that mostly needs just a mindset of how do we approach these things, how do we view these things, and then I think the rest kind of follows from that. Well, then the question is, like, how do we create pleasant software? And any ideas? Well, empathy, right? We need to care about each other, and I think that even the fact that we have developer experience instead of user experience shows that something is off, something is weird, that we even need to create these terms. And I think it's not enough just to say, okay, we care about how another developer is going to use it. It's more like, how do we create the incentive? How do we create the motivation that we even care about that, right? That we just don't dismiss it and say, well, they're going to figure it out. They're probably smart enough. There's this tweet just recently, actually, 2 days ago, that somebody said, hey, biggest weakness is that as soon as I finish a task that was challenging, I kind of lose motivation to finish and do anything further on. And I think that's a great example of what is the goal of writing software. And I think I was lucky enough 6 years ago to start Cachix, and one of my main ideas was like, okay, if I start a company, then I will help people use Nix, and they will hopefully pay in some way money for me. And that way we create an incentive that, okay, now we can create better software. And the more people use Nix, the more people feel that it's great, I get a reward for that, right? So that's a good incentive system. There could be other incentive systems, but I personally like to hear when people come and say, hey, this has been great to use, right? And that's the reward. And I think that's important to keep that in mind when we're creating software. So what is developer experience? There's so many ways to define it and to say it, but one of the major lines I see it is reducing cognitive overhead, right? So there's a lot of thinking we do, and there's certain kind of thinking that we shouldn't need to be doing, right? If I'm using a command line interface and I don't know how to use it, or I'm struggling to use it, that's the thinking that shouldn't be needed, right? That's like wasted mental energy and time. And as software engineers, I think that one of the things that doesn't get talked a lot about is that we have certain biases, especially because we're in this field. And one of those biases is usually, of course, I'm generalizing here, so please don't bear with me, is that we're biased toward jumping on a solution, trying to solve problems. And it's important to step back and sometimes redefine the problem, redefine the question, and also maybe removing the problem is the solution. It's by itself, right? And so many different things. But it's important to keep these things in mind when we're building software, because you've all probably been nerd sniped into something and spending hours down the rabbit hole, but maybe you wouldn't need to, right? So there's a lot of cognitive overhead things that fall in. This is not exhaustive list, but one is context switching, right? If you're working from home and you need to pay attention to others, that's a context switching we cannot fix. But maybe you need to look up documentation a lot of times when you're working with software, and that is something that could have been fixed by, software already telling you, GHC error messages, right? It can already tell you what the solution might be. There's a typo. And so there's such a context switching we can eliminate. There's then complexity and solutions in problems even. And then there's one that for me is the biggest one in terms of developer experience is making decisions, right? A lot of times, let's say you want to use a library from Cachix, you need to decide which one of the 15 libraries you need to pick, right? So that's very exhaustive. It's very expensive, right? I need to go and read the readmes of these libraries. I need to make a decision which one I want to pick. So there's been a lot of people in Hascal community trying to promote libraries and evangelizing which one is their favorite and so on. But at the end of the day, that's a decision you need to make. So we make a lot of these decisions when we are trying to write software. And the idea in my opinion, in developer experience would be to converge towards defaults, to converge towards saying defaults that we don't have to make those decisions. And sometimes they need to be made, but sometimes they're not needed. And then, as I said, an unintuitive interface. And, something I call fortune telling, which is predicting what I'm going to need in this software in a year. But I don't know it, right? So I'm trying to fortune tell what's going to happen in the future. And that's something that I also think should be avoided as much as possible, because things change, and we don't know what's going to happen in a year. All right, non-exhaustive list, but nevertheless. So as I said, one of the things we've been working on at Cachix is how do we solve developer environments? Because we do think that Nix is really good at this, but not in terms of the interface that we are used to. If you're familiar with the Nix community, you have probably heard about the F word, the controversial flakes, and yeah, we think that that's not the best interface, so we've created something called devenv. And the idea is that we want to have a declarative way of describing what the environment should be, and then that's what we get, right? And there's no readme, there's just this declarative declaration of what environment is. And hopefully we can get to a day where we have a single command of entering into a developer environment, and the readme is just yep, that's it. So we're using Nix, and I want to just go through a bit of how it works and what it does. So Nix is notoriously known for being hard to use, and what we wanted to do is to take the NixOS module system, which is what you're seeing right here, which is essentially a glorified. The way I like to describe it to people who are not familiar with functional programming, and none of that, is a glorified JSON with functions and substitutions, right? That's very ignorant way of explaining it, but for someone that's new, I think that's a great way of saying it. And taking all of these different components of software we have and providing this unified DSL interface on top of that, right? So we have one language in which we can configure things. And here you can see, so at the top we see like a function that accepts all the packages that Nix provides, and config, which is actually the return of this, what we're describing here. So it's like a recursive definition. So we can refer to the config that we're defining, as you can see there in the enter shell. And then we have a bunch of options. So at the top we have environment variables, where we define greet environment variables. Then we have packages. These are the packages that will be provided in developer environment. And enter shell, this is bash code that will be executed once you enter this environment, and it's going to print hello and then display the version of this program. So then if we say devenv shell, which is like, okay, let's activate the environment, we get, well, what we would expect from here. From here we get this nice little command line NCDU and a nice greeting. So this environment, developer environments are meant to be extensible, so you can like extend your with the options. And the NixOS module system, for those that are not familiar with it, there's like a lot of ways to like deprecate these options, to rename them, and so on. So there's like a really nice life cycle of extending and changing things, which I think is really nice compared to let's say Flakes. So devenv, like, okay, now this was really the basic example, but there's a lot of things you can do. For example, just recently we added support for defining scripts that are not just bash. So for example, you can define a script of new shell, and this is how you would define it in the declaration. You could even import this definition from a file or whatever. But anyway, this is like a declarative way to define scripts. And once you enter this environment, you will have the new shell greet command in your environment that you can run there. Right. So then one of the major components of the devenv is like that you can run processes. This is like very similar to Foreman or proc file format that Heroku, I think, kind of introduced years ago. And the idea is, again, with these options, we can just define the processes. In this case, we add a package make docs, and then the process will just execute make docs serve. So all the processes will already run inside the environment, which is kind of nice. So you can like execute packages or tools or whatever, scripts, whatever in that definition. And yeah, I don't think this is the black background is the best here, but like once you run devenv up, not the best experience. You get a list of processes at the top that you define, and then at the bottom you see the logs. So if you can go like in the interface up and down through different processes, and then you can see the output at the bottom. So this is like a really nice way of developing, and many people are used to develop with containers and Docker today, and this is completely native. So if you're using macOS or Linux, this is running on your machine, and there's no overhead of anything. And I think that's pretty nice, because I think that for development, the containers are usually more in the way and more of a solution to like package things up, but Nix does this for us, so we don't need to do that. And the isolation part is not really needed. We plan to add like a in-container integration, so that the whole project runs in container if you really want to like separate, I don't know, ports or whatever between different projects and stuff like that. But I think this out-of-the-box experience is pretty nice. Yeah, I think that's it. So then on top of processes, there's an abstraction called services. So for example, we have about 30 services right now, one of which is PostgreSQL. So you can like define which version of Postgres you need, like, you know, which databases should be created. In this case, I'm showing off also here, like there's extensions for Postgres you can kind of install, preload libraries and so on. So that's pretty nice because usually, you will need like Redis or Postgres or whatever on top of your Haskell things. And then just in the recent version of Devon, we added like enter test, which is like this bash script that executes once your whole developer environment is defined and activated and your whole processes are running. And then enter test is like a bash script that will run with that complete environment running, which is super nice for like functional tests, integration tests, whatever you want to call it. So like, waiting for your web application is the typical use case. Running, like UI browser tests or whatever if you're doing web development and so on. But really anything can go in there. Yeah. Right, so here comes the Hascal bit. So there is also support for 50 languages, one of which is Haskell. And right now, you specify the package by knowing which packages exist in Nix packages, which is a bit unfortunate. So at one point, I hope we will switch to just version and you will put a string and you can say 9.10.1, but it's not currently there. Somebody needs to package in Nix all the GHCs, which I hope one day is going to happen. I think Haskell.nix is pretty close to that, but they do remove like the older bits. But it would be nice that you can get like, I don't know, 6 years of GHCs with Nix, which shouldn't be hard to do. And then we can define, like, for example, we like to develop with GHC ID, but there's like GHC Watch now, I think, being developed by Mercury. And again, this is like a Nix abstraction on top, and you can just say, okay, I want a process that will be from package, whatever, my package, I want these components, I want to pass arguments when you run it, and I want like stack integration, for example. And then GHC ID will like construct the command line to run GHC ID correctly, and it's gonna run it for you as a process. And this is how we develop at Cachix, all the stuff that we do. And it's really nice because GHC ID just auto-reloads and all those things. There is one bug in GHC ID that I found really annoying, which is like when it reloads, it will not kill all the Haskell threads. So if you have like a web server running, it will just fail to kill that, and then the new thread will just say, okay, that the port is already taken. So I hope that will get fixed, or GHC Watch will take over, whatever. But I'm confident we'll fix that. But that's a really nice feedback loop. And then you can define also pre-commit hooks. There's a bunch of like Haskell hooks in there, like we use Cabal format and normal, and there's a ton of other formatters and so on. So when you run devenv test, that will actually run then on CI and enforce that all the hooks are, that everything formats correctly, but also when you're developing things, it will just format the files that you're actively changing, which is pretty nice. So as I said, there's more languages. So if you use Rust or Python or whatever, you can all use it, and you can also combine these files. So if you have like a monorepo, you can kind of have different definitions. Let's say you have backend, frontend, so on, which is pretty nice. So yeah, a quick rundown. Like right now you can do these things. You can also create containers and run them and copy them to registries and stuff like that. So you can take this environment that you have described and then say, okay, put it into a container, and now, I don't know, let's deploy it somewhere. So it's like a really powerful way of defining containers, and I think it's superior to the imperative way that we do today with Docker and other tooling. So I really wish that more people would like know about this, how cool it can be to just have this abstraction on top of Nix. But yeah, I think the rest I kind of went through. Right, so the other part is talking about Haskell and developer experience in Haskell. So just about the devenv, try it, and we're here to fix Devon, so don't feel shy to complain about it. Don't feel shy to tell us what's broken. We have prioritized the pleasant experience at the top, but there is a long way to make it really stable and reliable. So we know that there's some parts that are still not the best. but we are like super actively working on it. So we are prioritizing reported bugs. So if you do report it, we'll try to fix it. All right. And this part is very short, and I just want to talk about like our experience, because Cachix is written in Haskell, and we do a lot of Haskell stuff. Is what are the things that we would like to see fixed in Haskell that are kind of like related to the developer experience. So this is more like a pet peeve of mine, is like type checking the readme. So like a lot of times when I go to a Haskell project, there is no example, or if there is, like, it doesn't type check anymore. So like, I wish more people knew about the markdown unlit, which I built it as an executable, because if you make it a test suite, then it actually runs the example, but I just want to type check it. So this is a bit of a hack that you just make an executable, and then that means that Cabal or Stack or whatever you're using is going to build and type check your README, but it's not going to actually execute the example, which I think is a nice way. I hope there was a better way to do it with the test suite, because then you do have a README executable, but yeah, it's fine. So that's just a pet peeve of mine, that I think more people should type check their READMEs and provide a minimal example with all the imports, because like that also saves a lot of time when you're entering a project, to understand what is like the minimal working example. Another like pattern that is, I think, super not common in Haskell, and I don't know why, but is convention over configuration. The idea is that like it's nice that we're like explicit. It's nice that we have a way to configure things, but having defaults for that configuration is really nice. That, for example, in devenv, when you say languages.haskell.enable, you get the latest GHC, and you get like language server support for the GHC. That is by default. You don't have to do anything to get that. But you can like say, okay, I want a different version of GHC, or I want, different version of language server support, and so on. So by default, we have assumptions of what you should get, but you are able to then configure it if you don't like the default, right? So that's the idea that I think is super nice experience. Sometimes, yes, it's hard to pick a default. I think my mindset is usually like what the majority of people would want, and then for the edge cases, there's configuration, right? But I think that's like a really nice experience when you enter any kind of project. Then I just want to point out that I just love GHC 2000 initiative and what Haskell community has been doing, and like slowly like removing the extension hell. But there's one thing that I'm really missing with this, is that we would remove this bit, which is like that we would. So GHC often breaks, right? Between versions, something doesn't compile anymore because things have slightly changed in the types, and this is a bit of accidental thing, right? But also well intended. But I also think that we could use this to advance the language itself and make changes to Haskell, so that if we say, okay, like, I don't know, record.syntax is great and it's been proven in many other languages, or maybe record.syntax needs work, but whatever, maybe we can like make a better language and use this as a way to improve the language itself. Because frankly, like, for example, we've been doing Haskell for 7 years, and it took a while to like go through all the different extensions for this and figure out what is the right combination, what are the drawbacks, and so on. So all of that time and each developer, each team needs to go through nowadays, right? So a bit of controversial probably, but I really think that moving the language forward would be really through this initiative would be really nice. Then another thing that we have a problem with is like, because Haskell is still not as widely used as like, let's say, I don't know, top 10 languages, there's a lot of SDKs we have to write, and that is like probably our biggest drawback of using Hascal, especially in a small team where spending 4 days writing SDK for a service is really a waste of our time. But we need that, right? We need to interrupt with some service. And we were maintaining, I think now 10 SDKs or something in Hascal. So I really wish that people from the community, somebody who is like a freelancer or something would step up and offer this as kind of as a service and say, okay, I want to specialize on SDKs, and companies would be able to, because I don't want us to maintain these SDKs. I would like somebody else to maintain that. And I think it's super nice because a lot of them are just HTTP wrappers with authorization, blah, blah, blah. It's very mechanical work. But that's something that's really missing. And if somebody wants to do that kind of work, please let me know. We're happy to work with you. Another field is there's a lot of low-level APIs in Hascal, but I think there's a lot of room for high-level APIs that are opinionated, of course, because then there's leaky abstraction. But so we've built something called type Websocket. Probably you're familiar with the Websocket library, which is quite old now. I think it's 12 years since it was created. But we wrote a super simple but very useful abstraction on top, where you get 2 threads. One receives the data in from the WebSocket, and one sends it, wires up the ping pong protocol for WebSocket, for WebSockets. Then it uses channels to wire up the whole sending and receiving. It creates a nice API so that you can just pass your eyes for the client and the server, and that you can define some types for client and server, nothing super fancy. And then retries, for example, connection, if connection falls down, using a library called Stamina that we wrote. I'm going to talk about that later. And most importantly, handles the graceful shutdown, which is always hard to implement in Hascal, in my opinion, due to exceptions and all that stuff. So we've done this actually not for WebSocket, also for sockets and so on, but I think it's really nice, and if somebody finds this useful, let me know. And yeah, that's about it. So the last bit I want to talk about is I think this is probably our biggest pain point is exceptions in Hascal are super hard. So I think it comes more from the ignorance point of view. You're just okay, if you want to do exceptions, you just treat the asynchronous exceptions separately and use this safe exception or whatever. But in the reality, it's totally not true. And what's the hardest bit is that the consequences of getting them wrong are pretty dire, right? The program will hang, the program will crash. And we've had quite a few bugs due to this. So first of all, you really need to burn yourself many times with the exceptions to get them right. And second of all, there is no escape for exceptions. As soon as you use networking libraries, as soon as you use web libraries, there's a lot of different exceptions. And there is really hard way to understand what are you getting right, what's being raised. There's no hierarchy of exceptions or anything like that. It's there's some types all over the place, but there's no way to know what's happening. For example, exception in linked thread is an async exceptions, but it often wraps asynchronous exceptions. So you if you do retries, you need to know that you need to unwrap it and then retry the inner exception and all these things that are super subtle. So what we did was we did write Stamina.sh, which is retrying abstraction for a monadic retry, and then we have Stamina.http, which is retries all the HTTP different error modes that are retryable, but doesn't retry those that are not, for example. And if you read that code, you will see it's super subtle. And I didn't want to talk about this in the beginning because I don't have a good solution because it's very intertwined into the Hascal ecosystem. But I would really like to see more work on this because I think it's it's been really painful for us, and I have no solutions for it. So if somebody has ideas how to make it better, that would be really nice. Okay, I didn't want to end on a low note, so here's some cats. Hascal is great. Thanks for listening to this, and I hope that you try devenv, and if any of these Hascal bits that are bothering us is your thing, please talk to me, and thank you.
Hello, thank you for the great talk. So I'm curious about devenv is a development environment, right? But you can also run tests. So I would assume then I'm supposed to run on your development environment. How do you link production environments and dev environments? Because the files we were looking at are specific to devenv. So I assume that production would not be involved in this at all. So
right.
What is the way?
That's a great question. Yeah, so that's essentially the main reason why we added container support. So right now, the best answer I have for that is like, if you run a run, then these environments in production, you create container out of it, and then you ship that to whatever fly.io or whatever service you're using. There is like, if you want to, I don't know, deploy NixOS server or something, then these things don't really work together, for example, right? But the way I see it is like developer environments and then production environment is kind of similar in a way that we have a way of detecting when you're building a container, so you can create conditions in the definition itself. So you can say like, enable PostgreSQL only if we are not building a container, right? That means like in developer environment you will have it, but let's say you are deploying a container but you're using an external Postgres, right? In that case it will not run it. So that allows you kind of to conditionalize the differences. Yeah, that's shortly it.
Thanks for the talk. As a Nix noob, I think I understood most things, but I was wondering what the very first block in each script means, where it says packages, comma, and then ellipsis.
Ellipsis? That first line?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is like a Nix syntax. Essentially, in Nix, because we are lazy, you can, instead of enumerating all the inputs that you get in the attribute set, you can just like abbreviate them basically with 3 dots. Because there's quite a few things that are passed to this, so if you don't need like config lib and blah blah blah, you don't need to just repeat it, so it's a bit of a shortcut. Okay. Yeah, that's it.
There's an excellent Nix language tutorial on Nix.dev that you should definitely read as a Nix noob. My question is, does devenv help building packages in CI, not containers, but building them to binaries, static binaries, and so on?
Yeah, so like we have, it's a good question. Yes and no. So there's like, we can get there, but it's a bit of wiring up right now to do. So we have a way to, there is a standard env option, so you can kind of override standard env when you can say like, give me a package is static, for example. And there's devenv build, which allows you to build attributes. So with that machinery, you should be able to like wire things up. But we are slowly working towards like having options for all these things, and I hope that we're going to have like abstractions for building the static binaries at some point. But it's something that can be done.
Hi, thanks for the talk. You mentioned earlier that in Nix language we can have recursion. So do we have a risk of running into an infinite loop while parsing a configuration file?
Oh yes. So yeah, if where is that example? I think it's the first one. Yeah, so like very famously, that's why also some people are, that's one of the bad experiences with Nix, it used to be at least, that you would get infinite recursion. And that used not to have like a nice traceback of where it happened. That got improved a lot in the last years due to error messages like enhancement, like initiative. So yeah, if the config that you're referencing there is also defining itself, right, then you will get infinite recursion error. It's very subtle, so you kind of have to build intuition, and this is probably the most like unintuitive and hard thing about like this. So every time you're using config, you have to understand that this is a recursive thing, and if you do end up with like infinite recursion, use bisection to figure out, you know, where things went wrong. That's my best advice. Until you develop intuition, it doesn't happen as often.
Do devens compose? Because sometimes you have overrides for broken packages upstream, and you might have them in different repositories. Mm-hmm. So you can do this with flakes.
Yeah, you can do. So like, there is also devenv.yml, which is like the configuration bit, and in that file you can like import different devenv files and like glue them together. And that's something that we support. This is mostly to support monorepo, but you can also import them from flake inputs, so you can like import from GitHub a devenv file and then like put it in. So for example, a lot of companies, they have like a global devenv and then they import it in each project and extend it, for example, and things like that. Yeah.
That looks like a really cool tool, but I didn't get if I do devenv for a Hascal project, and I want to build. So do you just use then Cabal to build the executable, or is there some support? The question was about static binaries, but if like not static binaries, is there some build support? And if so, where did you because there's like GHC with packages in Nix, so where do you get the package list? Do you like use Nix packages, or do you use Cabal Resolve?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Yeah, there's so many details to this. So like, first of all, if you wanna, let's say, use Cabal, then you will need some system libraries, I don't know, OpenSSL and so on. So you can define them here in the packages, right? So whatever you will specify there will also be available to Cabal. So, you know, whatever dynamically linked libraries, statically linked libraries, and so on. So yeah, we use Stack because of legacy reasons, but like you can use Cabal and Stack without Nix, right? Because this devenv is already providing you the Nix base and providing you the environment. One of the things that I would like to do, and this is quite a bit of work, and we don't have the funding for it yet, is that we would be able to parse Cabal files and understand like the mapping between what like package config declares, for example, in Cabal, and then automatically like suggest to you which libraries you should add to your devenv, right? So if you're using, I don't know, Kryptonite, then we would already say, okay, you need to add OpenSSL because that's what this package requires. So there's a lot of room for improving the experience here for the future one. I hope that answers your question more or less.
So you use Stack and you basically use the Stack package.
Yeah.
Snapshot.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, we use Stack. So like, I hope that we can provide a simple way to say, okay, like we want to build static libraries with Stack, and we would like give the compiler then, which is already pre-configured to build static libraries, for example. That would be also something that is totally possible. It just needs to be done. Actually, for Rust, we already like give you like the linker that is much faster and things like that, the mol linker, and so there is a lot of room for these optimizations.
So you said at the beginning that defaults are always a good idea. It would be nice if the ecosystem converges maybe on a single tool, but now there's devenv, there's dev shell, I guess there's derenv, there's Nix derenv, there's lorry, apparently. I use none of them because I can't decide. I have no idea which one is the best.
There you go. We're back to slide 1, right? Yeah, I don't know. I think there's no good answer for this. Like, I mean, I'm super biased toward Devon because I worked on it for like a year and a half since NixCon 2022. I do believe it's the best tool there is out there, but again, that's all I can say. I mean, there's a lot of great people doing a lot of different work. I do plan to create like a matrix of what are the different decisions that each of these tools makes. I think that helps a lot with deciding and why, maybe for the Devon side. And yeah, that's the best I can offer, I think.
Philosophically, what problem would you say devenv does not solve? For what problem would you say, hey, you can use devenv, but you really should use something else?
It's a good question. The way I see it is like developer environments are like a super entry point to anything you develop, right? So I think that fits a lot of any project, right? I think that as soon as, if you're like using NixOS, or if your production is different and you really want to make sure developer environment is the same as production, that's something that, if you cannot use containers, right, which is the only thing we support right now, I would say then like that's something to be aware of. And if you have a way to achieve, you know, the same environment between production and developer environment, then do it in another way. That would be the major one, I think, but I haven't really thought about this. I'm biased towards using Devon for everything, but there's also like a lot of people, some people use flakes, but I think we're getting very close to feature parity. So I think there is less and less reasons to use them, in my opinion, again.
Thank you.
So that looks really nice. I was wondering, how do I manage an external dependency? Let's say I depend on a private repository. Do I still need to use an external tool like Neve with devenv, or can I just put my inputs a little bit a la flakes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I didn't really show this, but like Devon has a YAML component, which I know it's YAML, but it's really important if we want to have this tool widely used, that we use the formats that people are used to. In that, you can define the inputs like you would for flakes. So you can like define GitHub or, you know, tarball or whatever. And actually here at the top where the config is, you will get inputs variable, binding, whatever, and then you can reference all of the inputs, so you can directly just use them. So none of that, like, yeah, that's it. It's quite simple. I think there's...
So does Devon have support for like these like third-party dependencies? So if I need to install something by downloading a tarball or cloning a Git repo, can I do it using devenv?
Yeah, it's a great question. You can do that. It a bit depends what you want to do. So one way is to use inputs, as I said, or you can like you know, clone a repo, and then you have it available at the Nix layer, and you can then like copy it inside your project. We have like a devenv_root variable, which is like the root of your project, so you can use that to work with your local directory. But you can just, in the enter shell, right, it's just a bash script that executes when you enter, so you can write imperative code and you say, you know, if this folder doesn't exist, then do git clone or whatever. So there's always this escape hatch for doing imperative things if Nix is not a good solution, a good abstraction.
Thank you so much for making this. It could be considered like a gateway drug into Nix for many people who might find even flakes hard. But my question is, how difficult is it to add a language, for example, like Gleam, to?
Sorry, one more time, I didn't quite hear.
How difficult is it to add a language?
How difficult it is to add a language? It's very simple, actually. If you go to, actually on the devenv.sh, we have a contributing section, and there's like an explanation of what it takes to add a language. We have a super low barrier. Basically, like you expose the enable flag, and if enable flag is true, then you add a bunch of packages that are like, the compiler, the linter, and so on. That's like the starting point, and then we start adding language server support and things like that to make it a better supported language. But it's super, super easy, I think. I'm happy. We have a Discord, so people there are super active, and they help with this kind of things as well.
Yeah. Let's start. Oh, one more question.
Hey, thanks for the talk. One quick question that might have a long answer. How do you integrate editors into the dev shell? Is there some preset for configuration for editors, like I want to hook up LSP? Because that is one of the major things that people get hold up a lot.
It's a great question. There's a few things. So first of all, for example, for VS Code, we have an abstraction to declare VS Code settings. So you can kind of like say, okay, VS Code settings, I don't know, enable these extensions or whatever for that particular project, right? So that's one part. Then the language server is like, the way I see it is devenv provides the language server, and then the editor just needs to be able to use it, right? So that's as simple to say, but a lot of editors do not allow you to run devenv and then operate inside that environment. So a lot of times you need to run the environment and then launch the editor inside of it. So for example, VS Code, there is a devenv integration which works well with devenv. So like it will, as soon as you open a project, it will launch devenv, and it will enter that, and you will have like language server, LSP, and everything. But for example, Z, which is like now super hyped new editor, they don't have this like loading implemented yet. So there's quite some work on the editor side if they want to support this kind of tooling. But luckily, devenv is super popular. For those who don't know it, it's unfortunately a very close name. But it just allows you, when you enter a directory, it will kind of execute something to enter this environment, like a bash script. And devenv integrates with that, so it will just, as soon as you enter your project, when you cd into it, it will activate the devenv environment. And a lot of editors have extensions for this, so this is what we kind of piggyback on. Yeah. It's not a perfect answer, but that's the best we have right now.
Okay, let's thank Domen again for the great talk.
Thank you.